Welcome back to Wealth of Words, where we crack open some seriously thought-provoking
Oh,
books.
yeah.
And today we're diving into The Book of Joy
Mm,
by the Dalai Lama
the Dalai Lama.
and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I mean, talk about a dynamic duo for exploring the very essence of joy.
It's not every day you see a spiritual leader
Right.
and an archbishop teaming up to write a guide to happiness, is it?
Right. You'd think they'd be debating theological points, not cracking jokes and sharing wisdom on how to live a more joyful life. Speaking of which, you were practically radiating good vibes after reading this one.
Oh, yeah.
What was it about this book that struck such a chord with you?
Well, it's not just about slapping on a smile and pretending everything's peachy.
Right.
This book dives deep into cultivating a resilient,
Yeah.
lasting sense of joy that can weather even the toughest storms.
Okay.
And it's not about ignoring hardship,
Right.
but transforming our relationship to it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
One of the core ideas they present
Mm.
is this distinction between fleeting happiness
Yeah.
and true joy.
Absolutely. It's like the difference between the temporary high of winning the lottery
Right.
and the deep contentment that comes from within, from a sense of purpose and inner peace.
Yeah.
The book really emphasizes that joy is an inner state, something we can cultivate even when external circumstances are challenging.
So it's not about chasing fleeting pleasures or ignoring the difficult stuff.
Yeah.
It's about building this inner resilience, this foundation of joy
Yeah.
that can support us no matter what life throws our way.
Yeah.
I used to think happiness was all about achieving certain goals or acquiring material things.
Right.
But after reading this,
Yeah.
I'm starting to see it's more about shifting my perspective,
Mhm.
about finding contentment in the present moment.
That's a key insight for sure.
Yeah.
And that's where the 8 pillars of joy come in.
Okay.
Think of them as a framework for cultivating this inner strength and resilience.
8 pillars. That sounds like a lot to keep track of.
Huh.
Give us a rundown.
All right, here we go. Perspective,
Yeah.
humility, humor,
Yeah.
acceptance, forgiveness,
Hmm.
gratitude, compassion, and generosity.
Wow, that's quite the list. It's interesting that perspective is the first pillar they highlight.
Right.
It makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Our perspective shapes our entire experience.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that how we choose to see the world, how we interpret events,
Yeah.
plays a huge role in our overall well-being and our ability to experience joy. The Dalai Lama actually provides a powerful example of this in the book.
Oh, right. His experience with exile. You know, I have to admit, if I were in his shoes, I'm not sure I could find much joy in being forced to flee my homeland.
It's certainly an unimaginable hardship.
Mm.
But he talks about choosing to see his exile not as a personal tragedy, but as an opportunity to serve humanity on a broader scale.
Wow.
Talk about reframing a difficult situation.
Right.
Instead of succumbing to bitterness and despair, he chose to focus on the positive potential of his situation.
That's some serious mental jujitsu right there.
It-
It makes you wonder, what opportunities are we overlooking in our own lives simply because we're so focused on the negative? What if we could train ourselves to see challenges as springboards for growth and new possibilities?
That's the invitation the book extends to us, isn't it? To challenge our default perspectives and actively seek out the hidden opportunities even in difficult times.
Right.
It's not about denying the hardship, but about choosing to focus on what we can learn and how we can grow from it.
Okay, perspective. I'm getting it.
Right.
But let's lighten things up a bit.
Yeah.
What about humor?
Yeah.
I mean, the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu are known for their playful banter, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're constantly teasing each other throughout the book. It's truly heartwarming to see.
Wow.
And they emphasize that humor is not just a way to lighten the mood.
Right.
It's actually a powerful tool for coping with stress, building connection,
Yeah.
and finding joy even in the midst of suffering.
So laughter really is the best medicine. I mean, aside from actual medicine, of course. We're not advocating for replacing your doctor's advice with a stand-up comedy routine.
Exactly. But the book does make a strong case for incorporating more laughter and lightheartedness into our lives. The Dalai Lama even talks about how humor helped him through some of his darkest moments. It's a reminder that even in the face of hardship, we can choose to find moments of joy and levity.
Okay, humor check. Now, I'm curious about compassion. They list it as one of the pillars, but how exactly does compassion lead to joy? Isn't it more about selflessness than personal happiness.
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
But the book argues that compassion is not just about being kind to others.
Right.
It's actually a pathway to greater joy for ourselves.
Hmm.
When we connect with others, when we extend kindness and care,
Yeah.
we tap into a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment
Okay.
that naturally leads to greater joy.
So it's like by helping others, we're actually helping ourselves. It almost sounds a bit selfish.
It's not selfish in a negative sense. Think of it like this. When we act with compassion, we're not just doing something nice for someone else, we're actually engaging in an activity that benefits both parties.
Right.
It's like a win-win situation. And the research backs this up.
Okay.
Studies have shown that acts of kindness and compassion actually boost our own levels of happiness and well-being.
Wow. So there's actually a scientific basis for this idea that compassion leads to joy. I'm starting to see how all these pillars are interconnected. It's not just a random list of virtues.
Right.
It's a framework for cultivating a life filled with purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
And ultimately with joy.
Exactly. And that's just scratching the surface.
Okay.
We've only touched on 3 of the 8 pillars so far.
Wow.
There's so much more to explore in this book. But before we get too carried away,
Yeah.
I think it's time to move on to some of the other pillars. What do you say we tackle acceptance next?
All right, acceptance. That sounds pretty passive, doesn't it? Like giving up or resigning yourself to whatever life throws at you.
It's actually the opposite of giving up. It's about facing reality head on, acknowledging both the good and the bad, without resistance or judgment. In the book, they talk about how acceptance is a key ingredient in transforming suffering into joy.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference.
Yeah.
It's not about passively accepting things we don't like,
Yeah.
but about choosing to engage with reality as it is without trying to force it into some idealized version we have in our heads.
Exactly. It's about letting go of that constant struggle to control everything to make things different than they are.
Okay.
And that can be incredibly liberating because when we stop resisting reality,
Yeah.
we free up so much energy to focus on what we can actually change, what we can actually influence.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about things that are genuinely painful or difficult to accept, like, say, the loss of a loved one?
Yeah.
How can we possibly find joy in those situations?
The book doesn't shy away from those tough questions.
Okay.
The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu both acknowledge that life inevitably involves suffering.
Right.
But they emphasize that even in the face of profound loss, we can choose to embrace the full spectrum of human experience,
Okay.
including the pain. And in that embrace,
Yeah.
we can find a deeper appreciation for life itself.
So it's not about denying the pain,
Right.
but about allowing ourselves to feel it fully without letting it consume us.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging the reality of suffering and cultivating a resilient spirit that allows us to find moments of joy even in the midst of it.
It sounds like mindfulness plays a big role in this process of acceptance.
Absolutely. The book emphasizes that mindfulness is essential for developing this ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, without getting swept away by them. It's about creating space between ourselves and our reactions so we can choose how we respond to difficult situations.
You know, I used to think mindfulness was all about sitting on a meditation cushion and chanting But after reading this book, I'm starting to see it's more about cultivating a present moment awareness in everyday life.
Exactly. It's about noticing the sights, sounds, and sensations around us. About tuning into our breath.
Yeah.
About paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment. And the more we practice this kind of present moment awareness, the more we develop that inner resilience we were talking about earlier.
So mindfulness is like a muscle we can strengthen through practice.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we exercise that mindfulness muscle,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to handle life's inevitable challenges with grace and equanimity.
Right. Mindfulness and acceptance. Check. What about forgiveness? That's another one that can feel a bit tricky.
It's definitely one of the more challenging pillars to put into practice, but the book emphasizes that forgiveness is not about condoning harmful actions or letting people off the hook. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of anger, resentment, and bitterness.
So forgiveness is more about self-care than about the person who wronged us.
Exactly. Holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Oh, wow.
It only harms us in the long run. That's a powerful image. But how do we actually go about forgiving someone, especially if they've really hurt us?
The book suggests a variety of practices, including journaling, meditation, and even visualization techniques. The key is to find what works for you.
Right.
What helps you shift your perspective from anger and resentment towards compassion and understanding.
It sounds like it takes a lot of work, a lot of conscious effort.
It does. But the rewards are immense.
Yeah.
When we release those negative emotions,
Yeah.
we create space for peace,
Okay.
healing,
Yeah.
and ultimately joy.
Okay, forgiveness. I'm getting it. But let's move on to something a little lighter. What about gratitude? That seems like a pretty straightforward path to joy.
It is, in a way,
Yeah.
but it's also easy to take for granted. The book reminds us that gratitude is not just about acknowledging the good things in our lives.
Right.
It's about actively appreciating them, about savoring them.
So it's not enough to just mentally check off a list of things we're grateful for.
We have to really feel it to experience that sense of appreciation deeply.
Exactly. And the book suggests some practical ways to do that. Things like keeping a gratitude journal,
Okay.
expressing gratitude to others, or simply taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around us.
I actually tried the gratitude journal thing for a while. It's amazing how much it can shift your perspective,
Yeah.
how it can help you focus on the positive, even when things are tough.
It's a simple but powerful practice, and the more we cultivate gratitude, the more we realize how much we have to be grateful for, even in the midst of difficult circumstances.
Okay, gratitude check. We're making our way through these pillars.
Yeah.
What about generosity? How does that fit into the equation?
The book emphasizes that generosity is not just about giving material things. It's about giving of ourselves, our time, our energy,
Okay.
our compassion. And it's not about depleting ourselves, but about recognizing that true joy comes from sharing what we have with others.
So it's like that saying, the more you give, the more you get. But it's not about expecting something in return.
Right.
It's about the intrinsic joy of giving itself.
Precisely. When we act with generosity,
Yeah.
we create a sense of connection, of belonging, of shared humanity. And that connection is a powerful source of joy.
It's interesting how all these pillars seem to reinforce each other.
Right.
It's like they're creating a virtuous cycle where one positive quality leads to another,
Yeah.
and ultimately they all contribute to a deeper sense of joy.
That's a great observation. And that's what's so brilliant about the book's framework. It's not about following a set of rules.
Right.
It's about cultivating these qualities within ourselves so they become an integral part of who we are,
Yeah.
how we move through the world, and how we experience life.
I'm starting to see how the Book of Joy isn't just a feel-good self-help book. It's a guide to cultivating a way of being,
Right.
a way of seeing the world that opens us up to deeper levels of joy and fulfillment. But before we get too carried away with all these deep thoughts, let's take a moment to address something that might be on our listeners' minds. All this talk of joy and positivity, is it realistic? I mean, the world can be a pretty dark place sometimes.
That's a fair point. And the book doesn't shy away from the reality of suffering. In fact, it acknowledges that suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience.
Okay.
But it also emphasizes that we have a choice in how we respond to suffering. We can choose to let it consume us,
Yeah.
or we can choose to find meaning and purpose in it.
Hmm.
We can choose to cultivate joy even in the midst of hardship.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect or ignoring the difficult stuff.
Not at all. It's about developing an inner strength, an inner resilience that allows us to face challenges with grace and equanimity. It's about choosing to focus on the good even when things are tough. And it's about recognizing that joy is not a destination, it's a journey.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Joy is a journey, not a destination. I love that. It reminds us that even when we're going through tough times, we can still choose to find moments of joy along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about how to cultivate joy on a personal level,
Yeah.
but the book also touches on the idea of joy as a collective experience, right?
Yes, absolutely. The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu emphasize that our personal joy is intertwined with the well-being of others. You can't truly experience deep and lasting joy while surrounded by suffering. Yes, absolutely. The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu emphasize that our personal joy is intertwined with the well-being of others. You can't truly experience deep and lasting joy while surrounded by suffering.
So it's not about isolating ourselves and focusing solely on our own happiness.
Not at all. In fact, the book suggests that true joy expands when we share it with others. When we contribute to the happiness of others, we create a ripple effect of positivity that benefits everyone.
Yeah, it's like that idea of paying it forward, right?
Yeah.
One act of kindness can inspire countless others.
Precisely. And that brings us to the book's concluding message, which is that joy is not just a feeling, but a responsibility.
A responsibility. That sounds a bit serious for something as lighthearted as joy.
I know, right? But think about it. If we all take responsibility for cultivating joy in our own lives and sharing it with others, Imagine the impact that could have on the world.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not just about feeling good, it's about creating a more joyful, compassionate world. It's about recognizing that our own happiness is interconnected with the well-being of all beings.
Exactly. And the best part is we can start small. A smile, a kind word, a helping hand, these simple acts can ripple outward and create a wave of joy.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? What's one thing they can do to start cultivating more joy in their lives and spreading it to others?
I'd say choose one of those 8 pillars and focus on it for a week.
Hmm.
Maybe it's gratitude, maybe it's humor, maybe it's compassion. Experiment with the practices from the book and see what resonates with you, and then share that joy with someone else. Perform a random act of kindness, offer a listening ear, or simply share a smile.
Great advice. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Share your experiences with friends, family, or even with us in the comments below. We're all on this journey together. After all, the Book of Joy reminds us that joy is not a solitary pursuit, but a collective endeavor. By cultivating joy within ourselves and extending it to others, we can create a more compassionate, harmonious, and ultimately joyful world.
Well said. And before we go, I'll leave you with a thought-provoking question from the book. What if joy was the most revolutionary act of all?
Ooh, I like that. Something to ponder for sure.
Yay.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of Wealth of Words. Don't forget to follow us and share your thoughts. We love hearing from our fellow book enthusiasts.
Until next time, may your days be filled with joy. Yes, absolutely. The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu emphasize that our personal joy is intertwined with the well-being of others. You can't truly experience deep and lasting joy while surrounded by suffering.
So it's not about isolating ourselves and focusing solely on our own happiness.
Not at all. In fact, the book suggests that true joy expands when we share it with others. When we contribute to the happiness of others, we create a ripple effect of positivity that benefits everyone.
So it's like that idea of paying it forward, right?
Yeah.
One act of kindness can inspire countless others.
Precisely. And that brings us to the book's concluding message,
Okay.
which is that joy is not just a feeling,
Right.
but a responsibility.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit serious for something as lighthearted as joy.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But think about it.
Yeah.
If we all take responsibility for cultivating joy in our own lives,
Yeah.
sharing it with others,
Yeah.
imagine the impact that could have on the world.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not just about feeling good. It's about creating a more joyful, compassionate world. It's about recognizing that our own happiness is interconnected with the well-being of all beings.
Exactly. And the best part is we can start small.
Okay.
A smile, a kind word, a helping hand, these simple acts can ripple outward and create a wave of joy.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? What's one thing they can do to start cultivating more joy in their lives and spreading it to others?
I'd say choose one of those 8 pillars
Hmm.
and focus on it for a week. Maybe it's gratitude,
Okay.
maybe it's humor, maybe it's compassion. Experiment with the practices from the book and see what resonates with you. And then share that joy with someone else. Perform a random act of kindness, offer a listening ear, or simply share a smile.
Great advice. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Share your experiences with friends, family, or even with us in the comments below. We're all on this journey together. After all, the Book of Joy reminds us that joy is not a solitary pursuit, but a collective endeavor. By cultivating joy within ourselves and extending it to others, we can create a more compassionate, harmonious, and ultimately joyful world.
Well said. And before we go, I'll leave you with a thought-provoking question from the book. What if joy was the most revolutionary act of all?
Ooh, I like that. Something to ponder for sure. Now, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of Wealth of Words. Don't forget to follow us and share your thoughts. We love hearing from our fellow book enthusiasts.
Until next time, may your days be filled with joy.